Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. So today we're doing one of my favorite videos, which is my book wrap up for the month of October and what I plan to read in the month of November. So we're gonna go through that. And I think I'm gonna mix it up a little bit this time. So I never give spoilers on the books, but I also usually don't give a summary. But this time I think I'm gonna give you guys just like a couple sentence summary so you can decide if you want to read it, and then I'll give you my review and my thoughts on it. So just in case you're new to these videos, I don't have any type of a rating scale that I go by. Definitely not a professional by this by any means. So it's mostly just my feeling as I walk away from the book, and then my thoughts on it, how the book made me feel. So that's that. So let's go ahead and get right into it. I started the month reading the book Maggie Moves On by Lucy Score, which I believe was a new release. So this book was just adorable. So there's a YouTube star, Maggie, who decides to purchase a home and renovate it, and everybody in the town is kind of thinking she's a little crazy because it's like a crumbling Victorian mansion. So she ends up hiring a bunch of local people that live in the town to come help her fix this up. Her and one of the contractors, who I think is like the landscaper, end up having crazy chemistry. And then they just take on this project together, and it's like kind of like an HGTV makeover vibe with a little bit of a town mystery happening. So there's like a little national treasure type aspect to it. So it was just adorable. This book I gave a 4.5 out of 5. And it literally was like HGTV meets National Treasure, which sounds crazy, but somehow it just managed to work. So the beginning was a little slow to me. I honestly didn't really know what was even going on because I am, as I've told you in the past, I don't really read summaries beforehand, so I didn't even know what I was getting into. So at first it felt like kind of just like a, woman meets a man and they think they're hot, and then they're like having feelings for each other and fighting those feelings. But then like the whole town mystery comes into it, and it really starts to like open up and develop. And I just loved the characters. I felt they were so charming, and I just found myself smiling like the whole book. I was just smiling the entire book. I think that Lucy Score is so underrated because her writing is just so dynamic. There's so many different layers to it. And I don't know, I just thought this book was adorable. So I'm really pumped because I actually had purchased that book during like one of the Target sales. And so I'm glad to own that one because I feel like it's one I want to read again because there was just so much to it. Okay, so the next book was called All Downhill With You by Julie Olivia. And I think this was my first book from her. And this book is about a young woman who works at a theme park in a small town. And she is suing the roller coaster manufacturer because while she was at work, she was injured twice by the roller coaster. So the man that is the heir to the roller coaster company and also the engineer behind said roller coaster that was injuring her comes out to do a visit to see how he can repair the relationship with the amusement park. Because she's in a management position, the general manager of the park pairs her up with him to walk him through, and they obviously can't stand each other because she's suing him and he's being sued by her. So there's like an enemies to lovers situation happening. So that's what's going on in that one. For this one, this was a light, quick, easy read, and it was just adorable. It wasn't like overly like unforgettable or anything, but it had a unique plot, and I just felt like the way that the author walks you through it was really good. This one is like pretty high up there on the cheese factor. So if you don't like really cheesy moments, then you might not like love this one. It was like kind of like a Hallmark. There were some spicy moments, but the spicy moments, I don't know, they just felt like a little weird because this was a very like lukewarm, adorable type story, and then the spice was kind of sprinkled in. So it's kind of, I don't know. It didn't like the compatibility wasn't really there for me with the two. Like the spicy scenes were like over the top, and then the adorable scenes were over the top. So it just kind of felt like those didn't mesh together, if that makes any sense. But anyways, I feel like the romance needed a little bit more development, but other than that, I just think overall it was a really, really cute read. The next one was My Killer Vacation by Tessa Bailey. This book, okay, so basically what happens is a teacher and her brother decide to take a vacation on Cape Cod for a week, and they rent like basically the equivalent of an Airbnb, and they end up finding a dead body in the house. And it turns out that the dead body is the owner of said house. So the owner who had been murdered, his sister comes to the house and then says that the police aren't doing enough, so she's going to have her boyfriend's friend, who happens to be a bounty hunter, come and try and do like a PI type situation. So he is this like rough around the edges guy on a motorcycle and all this, and then the girl is like a sunshiny kindergarten teacher, but she's obsessed with true crime, so she's trying to help him solve this case. Now here's the thing, I gave this book a 3 out of 5. This book had like 0 plot. Like, that sounds like a lot, right? But the way that it's written, it's like very cut and dry, solving the murder. And basically the entire book is just about steam and sexual chemistry. That's it. The plot is barely touched in this book. So if you're wanting something that's just kind of like an escape, something like steamy to read, this is for you. But if you're looking for like plot and adventure and like actual substance, probably not for you. I really did love the setting. I loved the characters. I thought they were really funny. I loved the girl's brother, but it just wasn't like that great for me. Okay, the next book was called The Lost Ticket by Freya Sampson. And this one is just a very unique story. So basically, it's about strangers who ride a bus in London, and there's an older gentleman and a younger woman, and she strikes up a conversation with him and finds out that he is trying to find a woman that he met many, many years ago, I think 40 or 50 years ago, on the same bus, and has always thought about her. They never connected, and he just felt like there was a love story there. So the young woman decides that she's going to do her best to help him find this woman. In the process, she ends up meeting his caretaker, who's about her same age, and there's like a little bit of chemistry between them, but she's got a lot going on in her own personal life. This story, I gave a 4.5 out of 5. I felt like this was just charming, adorable, and just so unique. It was just such a unique situation. There was a bunch of connections happening. The story was just really heartwarming. There were some times where it was like a little too over the top with the sweetness, but I just overall just like enjoyed the message. I just loved the characters so much. They just like pulled at your heartstrings the entire time. And it was kind of like a just charming and quirky group of friends that were just so unlikely. Like, the chances of this group of people being friends with each other was like slim to none, but somehow it worked. And there was like a couple of side stories that I just felt were like a little unnecessary in the book, but just overall I just felt like it was like an escape. So if you're looking for an escape and you don't want like too heavy on the romance and you want more story based, this one would be the one for you. Okay, so the next book that I read was called The Last Green Valley by Mark Sullivan. And this is a story that follows a German family that had been living in Ukraine for, I don't know, decades. And because of World War II, they decide that they need to go back to Germany because they no longer feel safe where they're living. So they have to prove to the Nazi officers that they are of German descent, and they have to make the trek to Germany. During the process, they end up getting separated, and it turns into a whole thing. So it ends up being just like a really beautiful and moving story about the tenacity of families during World War II. So this book, the only thing is that the writing is incredibly detailed and it's a very slow moving book. And I never really truly got hooked into the story. However, I just felt like it's still important to read because I just sat there like just so grateful for everything that I have, because I cannot believe the amount of people that were affected by World War II. People that were even of the race that Hitler had determined was, you know, better. But it still was unbelievable to read what they went through. I also liked how there was kind of like anguish because during those times they had to make really impossible decisions, and one of the characters lives with a decision he had to make, and anybody on the outside was like, that's understandable, but for him it was hard to process. And I just feel like the author definitely wanted you to experience the trials that the family experienced. And I think that's a good thing because they're doing their best to really get you to understand how awful it was. But I just felt like sometimes it was just overly detailed. Like there was just way too much given. But I feel like I loved how the ending was handled. And I just feel like I said, it's just an important read. Like it's something that I think everybody should read to really kind of get a grip on how lucky we are, you know, or how lucky I am, I should say, because I don't know what your experience is. The next book that I read was Birds of California by Katie Coutinho. Maybe that's how you pronounce it. I'm not too sure. So this one was a story about a former child actor who has fallen out of fame, and she is now just working at her father's print shop. However, the TV show that she worked for when she was a child actor is talking about having a reboot. So they're all trying to convince her to join in the reboot. However, she had a very awful experience as a child actor and kind of went a little cuckoo. So her reputation is not the best, and she's not sure she's ready to fully enter the fame again. So they send in the guy that had played her TV brother on the show, who she happened to have an insane crush on. They send him in to try and convince her. And it's very important to him that she join the show because his finances are a train wreck. I gave this book a 3.5 out of 5. I felt like the plot was perfect, and I felt like it would have been a very, very cute story. But I just felt like it just didn't live up to the potential it had. It just felt a little forgettable, and like even though there was such a good story there, I feel like they focused too much on like the day-to-day life of the girl versus really developing the story itself or developing like a romance. And then there's like this very heavy situation going on, so I would recommend looking up trigger warnings, and I feel like there was no justice done to that situation. I feel like there was like, in the epilogue, there was like a paragraph dedicated to wrapping up the situation, which I felt was grossly underdone. So that kind of bothered me. So just wasn't a love for me, but the good news is it's a very quick read. I think it was under 300 pages or around 300 pages, so not bad. Okay, the next book that I read was called Pumpkin Spice and Not So Nice by Becky Monson, and I clearly picked this one up because of as you guys just saw, how cute the cover was, and then the title because we're in October, so I needed a really cute fall read, you know what I mean? So this one was about a girl who has a history of dating men who are emotionally unavailable. And what ends up happening is she's kind of the perfect girlfriend for them to work on their emotions, and then they realize that they're now open to having emotions, but she's not good enough for them. So they break up with her, and then the next girl that they start dating, they end up having a great life with, like get married, all of this stuff. So she realizes that's happening. She meets a guy who also is emotionally unavailable, and they meet because of a weird twist of fate. And he finds out that he can talk to her and ask her if she'll help him on becoming emotionally available, and he will pay her a pretty penny because he is the heir to like a yacht company or something like that. So it's funny because this plot is not really that strong, but somehow this book ended up just being like so adorable. It was the perfect fall read. It was a 4.5 out of 5 for me. It was kind of like quintessential like Hallmark situation. It had a, you know, sprinkle of cheesiness in there, but and it was limited on the spice, which I really enjoy spicy novels. But this one is more focused on kind of like the Hallmark good, wholesome type situation. The setting and the characters were just absolutely adorable. I feel like this one actually could have benefited from a little bit more pages. Like if there was like maybe 50 more pages, I feel like it would have developed to a full 5 out of 5 for me. But other than that, if you're just looking for a really cute fall read, boom, that's one for you. If you're into like Hallmark movies and stuff. But there is a little spice. So if you don't like spicy anything, that would not be the one for you. Okay, next up I read the book Terms and Conditions by Lauren Asher. And this one is part of a series called Dreamland Billionaires. I had read the first one and I didn't like love the first one, but I was intrigued enough by the concept that I decided I would continue with the series. So basically what happens is this older gentleman who is the I don't know how to explain him. He's like the patriarch of the family, and he owns a major company. He passes away, and in his will, he's decided to kind of put up some obstacles for his grandchildren and his son to have to do in order to access their full inheritance. So in the second book, which is the one we're talking about now, he has determined that in order for his grandson to become the CEO of the company, that he needs to marry someone and have an heir within the first year of marriage. I think that's what it was. So the dude, the main guy who needs to find the woman, has decided he'll just do like something where he finds someone and they have like an arranged marriage and there's like a contract and all this stuff. Well, because he's such a grumpy guy, the woman decides that even though he's offering like all the money in the world, she cannot be with him for the amount of time needed, and she will not have a child with him. So his assistant decides to step up to the plate and take on the challenge, and they enter into a contracted marriage. The whole premise behind this book is a little ridiculous. Okay, so we're just gonna say that. Like, it's 2022, come on. You know, you're gonna make someone marry you and have your child within the first year, but whatever. For the entertainment factor, I'm just gonna ignore that. 4.5 out of 5, because we're ignoring that whole thing. I didn't like I said, I didn't really like the first book in the series, but this one, I just loved it. I don't know what it was. I just felt like the characters were very refreshing. They were just very genuine. They were the way they were. They worked on themselves, but I feel like it was worked through in a realistic way. It wasn't like somebody's emotionally unavailable on Tuesday and by Thursday they figured out all their issues. It was a really slow burn, like slow burn, but the connection by the time like it really kicks off just ends up being so strong because of how long it built up for. And I don't know, I just think the whole plot was really cool, like the whole grandfather thing and like them not being able to access their inheritance until they've accomplished their tasks, you know? Okay, so the next book that I read was called Something in the Air by Suzanne Enoch. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. This was an adorable story, and it was set, I want to say, in like the 1800s or 1900s or something, but it's set during a time where, I don't know, it was like kind of like a royal situation. I don't know if they're like really royal blood, if you call it that, but basically like, you know, they're of society back in the day, and this is set in like England. So it's kind of like a Downton Abbey situation. And so in order for this woman to inherit the family cottage that she grew up in, or the family property that she grew up in, I don't know, like when they say cottage, I have a feeling it's probably like a Downton Abbey house, you know what I mean? So in order to inherit the property that she and her family live at, she needs to get married. However, she has other cousins that also, if they beat her to getting married, then they will inherit the property. So she's been kind of stalling a little bit and putting off the engagements that she's been offered by gentlemen because she's just trying to wait it out and find the perfect guy. Well, on the night that she has basically stalled on 3 of her engagement offers, her cousin ends up getting engaged. So she realized she needs to kick it up into high gear. She happens to run into one of her old friends, and so she proposes to him that they get married and that they have a partnership, just understanding that they won't be in love with each other and that they'll have access to the property and share a companionship, basically. And so he agrees to it. He said, that's fine, because I've never been interested in my mom hooking me up with people I don't want, so I might as well be with someone that I enjoy. So they do it. They get married, so she's able to inherit the estate. Well, 8 years goes by, and her grandfather invites her to his property and says, and you need to bring your children. Because part of the rules with this whole arrangement was that she was supposed to produce children. But she never did, because her and her husband are not in a real marriage, they're just in a companionship. So she has to come up with a plan on her feet to figure out how she can get some kids up there. This book, I gave a 4 out of 5. It was very charming, very quirky. It had such a cute concept to it. The situations that the characters get themselves into were like a little wild, a little unbelievable, but they were like super funny. Like there was moments where I was laughing out loud. There was some repetition that I was like seriously, can we edit that out? But outside of that, I just felt like the characters were really heartwarming. There's children that are involved in the situation and they end up being really cute. And I just loved the ending. Like, I just loved how everything got wrapped up. I just loved everything about it. So I just feel like there was a good message there too, that you'll just have to read it to find out. That's one I would definitely recommend. Okay, so the next book that I read was called Twisted Games by Anna Wang, I want to say is how you say it. But I don't know. Okay, so in this one is really, I just loved this one. I did not enjoy the first book of the series that much, but this one I really did enjoy it. So in this one, there's a bodyguard who's in charge of a princess of a foreign country, but they're living in the United States, and I want to say they live in DC, possibly. However, she is able to live in the United States because her brother is the one that's going to take over the throne. However, her brother decides to abdicate the throne, I think that's how you say it, because he's found a commoner that he's in love with, and so he wants to marry the commoner, and so he abdicates the throne to his sister. So she ends up having to move back to her country and take over the throne. So it's kind of a story about what she's going through, and then it's also a story about the relationship with her and her bodyguard. They cannot stand each other, but we all know where that ends up going. This one I give a 4.25 out of 5. I loved this book because it had the royal aspect, but it wasn't like a typical royal situation. There was a lot going on. There was a lot of characters, which usually can confuse me, but somehow I was just swept away with this one and I was able to keep up with it. There was like, this author did something weird though, because she starts out their story as like prequel to the first novel that she wrote, and then she like time jumps to after the story from the first one, and it was just a little weird to me. Like, I didn't feel like it was necessary. Like, I feel like you could have just picked up where their story took place, you know, after the first book. I don't know why that happened. But the chemistry between the two was phenomenal. The buildup was really good. I loved the emotional development was happening. I loved the backstabbing and the family drama that was going on. There was just so much entertainment in this one. And I just love how it all played out in the end. I just feel like it was awesome. It was a really, really good book. Okay, so the next book that I read was called Beckett Pierce, and this was by Nina Levine, or maybe Levine. So this one is about a girl who broke up with her boyfriend within the past year, and he ended up being a total jerk, and he stole a bunch of money from his best friend. So his best friend runs into the ex-girlfriend, and they kind of have a little bit of chemistry, but she's hated him forever. Thank you, sir. Jonathan has delivered me food. So they've like not liked each other, but tolerated each other forever. Well, he decides that he wants to take this girl out on a date and pursue her. So he purchases her at a charity auction where she's like being auctioned off for a date. So she ends up having to be with him, and then, you know, their relationship just kind of progresses. It's just kind of one of those ones. I loved the story. I loved the characters. I loved how they were working on themselves, but also building a relationship with one another. There was kind of like a Gossip Girl feel to it, because there's a lot of like social media and like gossip magazine like blurbs that get thrown in. So it kind of had like a little bit of a Gossip Girl situation, and it's a group of rich people. So it's just kind of like entertaining, juicy, that type of thing. Also, I felt like there was a really good balance of like great characters and villains. So I just loved it, and I think I ended up reading another book from her in this month as well. Okay, so the next book I read was The Sweet Spot by Trish Doler, and this one was adorable. So this one is a single mom who's working at a fancy hotel out in Miami, and then she unexpectedly loses her job through no fault of her own, and she's talking to one of her friends, and her friend tells her that she knows somebody who's opening a brewery / bed and breakfast type situation up in Ohio, I want to say, and thinks she'd be perfect for the job. So she decides to take her child, move up there, and when she gets there, the hotel is like not at all complete. So this one I gave a 4 out of 5. This one was another one that had like HGTV vibes to it, and basically what ends up happening is there's like a renovation of a bed and breakfast, but also like all of these little cabins that are on the property. And I think there was like a few spots where it was a little boring, so that's why it's a 4 out of 5 for me. So this was just a really heartwarming book. I just felt like I was smiling for most of it. I loved how it wrapped all up in the end. The only thing I wish is that there was a lot of drama that literally occurs in like the last 1/8 of the book, and I don't understand why it couldn't have been inserted earlier in the book to like kind of break up some of the boring moments from earlier in the book. So that's my only gripe with that one, but otherwise that's one that I would recommend. Next, I read Jameson Fox, also by Nina Levine, I think is how we say it. So this is a story about a woman who is I want to say she is some type of like, I don't know if she's a fashion model, celebrity of some form, and she had started her own company, raised it from the floor up, and then this man comes in and basically steals her company from her. I don't know if it was a hostile takeover, they don't really explain it, and she wants her company back. So he knows she wants her company back, so he gets her to agree to marry him for what is that called, like appearance purposes, because his mentor is willing to leave him an inheritance of his company if he's married, which is another one of those ones like, what, where did they come up with these things? So she agrees to marry him and follow his guidelines or whatever, and so it's like an arranged marriage type situation. So this one I gave a 4 out of 5. So I had just read that Beckett Pierce one I told you about. I just felt like this story was written really, really, really well. And I feel like it started off at a different point than most would have. The start of their story is like a little bit different, so that was kind of fun because it felt a little unique to me. I felt like there was the chemistry, the frustration, and the banter between the two was just so well written. Like it was just executed so good. And now, so the thing is, I randomly read like Beckett Pierce was number 3 in this series and Jameson was number 4. So now I want to go back and read 1 and 2 because I really enjoyed the characters and the writing style. Okay, the next book that I read was called Hard Gamble by Colleen Charles, and this book was just bizarre. Basically, this book is about a man who runs like a casino situation, and he like sets his sights on one of his employees' sisters and convinces the sister to come work for his brother who has challenges basically. So he convinces her to come, and then he's just kind of like obsessed with her, and that's literally the whole plot. So but then there ends up being like family drama that comes in, and it's almost got like a little bit of a mafia vibe to it. So this one I gave a 2 out of 5. It was so cringy. Like it was just so cringy, and the girl was literally like, I don't know, a lost puppy. I felt like it was just so weird. I was somewhat held by the plot, so that's why I read the whole thing, but I just felt like the writing was like juvenile. I don't know what was going on. It was just, and also there was like typos, grammar, like the editing was just nope. But the good news is it's only like 250 pages. So if you just want something quick and easy and like a guilty pleasure with a lot of steam, go for it, you know? Okay, so the next book that I read was Grumpy Cowboy by Max Monroe, and this is from the Single Dad collection number 3. This one is the story of a girl who is a physical therapist, I think is what she was, and she gets commissioned by her boss to go report to a ranch and help out with an injury. And she thinks that she's going to help out with the injury of like a 14-year-old, but instead she shows up and it's like a single dad living out on the ranch, and he's like the grumpiest dude ever, hence the name Grumpy Cowboy. So this one I gave a 4 out of 5. I felt like this one was really like entertaining, and it was a really quick read, so that was nice. And I loved the chemistry between the two and how like the romance was handled. There was 2 points of views in it, which I really love books with 2 points of views, but every once in a while there was like a random 3rd point of view that came in, and I just felt like that was very odd. Like I don't feel like it was needed, and it kind of gave like filler to the book that didn't need to be there. But overall I just loved it. I think it was set in like either like Montana or Wyoming or something like that, and I just loved like the setting and just the vibe overall. The next book that I read was The Mother Road by Megan Quinn. And this book was so cute. So this book was about a woman who is, she's like an influencer out in California, and she comes home one day and her brother and her dad are in her driveway with their family RV. And her mother had passed away years before and always wanted to take Route 66, aka the Mother Road, as a family vacation. But because she got sick, they were never able to take the vacation. Her brother's about to get married, so her brother and her dad show up in her driveway like a week before his wedding, and they decide that they want to take the Mother Road back to Chicago and then go home to get the brother married. But she finds out quickly in the trip that her brother's best friend, who also happens to be the man who broke her heart, is also going to be joining on the adventure. Listen, this book, I gave a 4.5 out of 5. This is such a great book. Like, you need to pick it up. I was laughing out loud. Like, there was so much, like, shenanigans that were happening. I just was, like, laughing out loud. I just felt like the writing was just so good. And I've never heard anybody talk about this book, and I'm confused as to why, because I just felt like it was so good. The only thing is, like, there were some scenes that are, like, super over the top, and there's some parts that are not super PC. But without, like, reading too much into it, I just freaking loved it, okay? I was full on sobbing at one point too, so it really took me, like, the full spectrum of human emotions. And the setting being on Route 66 was just really adorable. I just loved it. But the next book that I read, I'm just going to pop it up here on the screen because I don't know if I'm allowed to say it. And it's by Penelope Ward and Vi Keeland, which is a writing duo that I've read in the past. So this story is about a girl who's going on a road trip and she breaks down at a rest stop. So her and this other dude, or she doesn't break down, I think her tire dies or something. So her and this Australian hot man come up with an agreement that he needs to get to California too, and his motorcycle just broke down. So they decide to take the trip together. So there's like chemistry between them, but he seems to be holding himself back and she can't figure out why. So this book, when it first starts, it's kind of just like a meet cute. Like, I thought it was just going to be about two people that meet each other, have chemistry, and end up being together. But it takes a completely unexpected turn and develops into so much more. The twists and turns in this book were, like, insane. I did not want to put it down. There's a lot of spice in this book, but it's more of like a slow burn than anything. And I don't know, I found myself really enjoying it. It's definitely just like a guilty pleasure type read. Don't expect too much out of it, but it was really good. Okay, the next book that I read was The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. And this one is the story of a girl in Ohio. She's 11 years old, and she has been praying her entire life that she would be blonde-haired and blue-eyed. But in the year of 1941, her life takes an unexpected turn, and it just kind of walks you through what she's experiencing. I felt like so this one I give a 4 out of 5. This book is written in a very, like, raw and honest manner. So I was so moved by the story. And the writing style is very unique. It's not something that I've ever experienced before in a book. I felt like the points of views kind of jumped all over the place. So it got, like, a little confusing for me, but that could just be a me thing versus, like, a problem with the book. Because sometimes I have trouble focusing on things, so that could be why. But I just feel like at the heart of this book, it was just really powerful and moving. So that was The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. Okay, the next one. One of my favorite reads from this month was Runaway Groomsmen by Megan Quinn. This one is the story of a Hollywood screenwriter who was dating this woman for, I don't know, 5 years or something like that. And she ends up cheating on him with his best friend. But because they're all in Hollywood and the two, you know, his ex-girlfriend and his ex-best friend are actors that work on the movie that he wrote, you know, the people above him tell him that he needs to put on a good face for the better of the movie, and he needs to attend their wedding as the best man. So he's the best man at the wedding of his ex-girlfriend and ex-best friend. Well, he's standing there at the altar and just decides he doesn't need to deal with this crap. So he leaves in the middle of the wedding, much to everybody's dismay, and then takes off and ends up in like this little small town and is staying at like these cabins out in the middle of nowhere. So when he gets there, it turns into kind of like small town plus renovation vibes. So this one I gave a 4.5 out of 5. It was like such a good romantic comedy. Like there was just so much going on for it. Like it had the small town vibes, it had the renovation aspect, there was rescuing a business going on, second chances. There was this really sweet grandfather that almost had like, I don't want to give away anything, but it'll remind you a little bit of a movie that everybody's obsessed with. It was really like just so good. And then there's like this fierce, very fierce and also hilariously crazy best friend that's in the book, and I pray to God she gets her own book. There was like a love triangle situation that was happening, and I just felt like it went on a little bit longer than necessary. Because there's sometimes where love triangles make sense and then others where they don't. And in this situation, I just feel like it didn't make sense. But it was just really swoony, really romantic. It was just a great rom-com, like just a really great one. The next book that I read was called Flawless by Elsie Silver. And this one I gave a 3 out of 5. Sorry, let me tell you what it's about first. So this one is the story of a bull rider who basically makes a mistake and it costs him his sponsors. And his agent gets mad at him and decides that he's going to assign his daughter to go babysit the bull rider and try to get him back on the right path so his sponsors will be happy. This one, as I mentioned, I gave it 3 out of 5. I just felt like it was a little predictable and just way too unforgettable. Like the story was cute enough and I liked the idea, but I just felt like there wasn't enough like drama or entertainment to really keep me fully invested in that one. So it wasn't that great for me. The next book that I read was called The Makeup Test by Jenny Howe, I think is how you say it. So this book was the story of a girl who is in a PhD program and she is living out her academic dreams. She is accepted into basically a PhD program that she's always wanted to have, and she's also working for a professor that she's always wanted to work for as a TA. However, she finds out that she is a co-TA to this professor with her ex-boyfriend who broke her heart and also kind of did a jerk move in her career as well. So they're kind of like competing with one another because of their past. This book, I wanted to like it so much, but I ended up giving it a 2 out of 5. The premise was really good and there was plenty of potential to it, but I just felt like the way it was written was just very random. Like there was flashbacks that would happen, but they would happen like in the middle of a chapter and there wouldn't be like any warning it was happening. So it wasn't like 4 years ago. It was just like she would be in a cafe and then she would like flash back in her memory to something that happened. I just felt like it was like a little bizarre. Also, there's like a very large parent issue that's happening, and I feel like it like takes up a majority of the real estate in this book, and then at the end it's barely addressed, so that was bothering me. I didn't connect to the characters at all, didn't connect to the story, it was a no for me. The next book that I read was called Finley, Donovan is Killing It by El Cosimano. Hopefully I said that correctly. So this is a story about a single mom who is stressed out to the max. She's also a writer and she's on the deadline to get another novel to her publisher. But she basically is going through so much in her life that she just can't get it done. The bills are piling up, her ex-husband's being a jerk and he's pressuring her and she's just basically having a crap time. She ends up stumbling into a situation that involves a mystery and she decides to use it kind of as inspiration for the book she's writing. This one I gave a 4.5 out of 5. It's like a little bit of a thriller, but mostly it's just like kind of comedy, and I just got sucked right in, like from the very beginning. I didn't have to warm up to it at all. I was just sucked right in. I didn't want to put it down, but also it wasn't like my heart was beating out of my chest because it was written in like a very light and humorous way, but there's like a very like dramatic situation happening and there's a mystery unfolding, and I just didn't want to stop reading. It was like pure chaos, but it had like the right amount of chaos. And the characters were freaking awesome. Like, I just thought it was so cute. If you're in some type of a reading rut, I feel like this would take you right out. Or if you're like on vacation and you want something to read on the plane where it's not like, if you like mystery, but you don't want like your heart to beat out of your chest or have too much anxiety about what's happening, I would say that would be the one for you. Okay, so this next book was called Been There, Married That by Gigi Lavangi. This is the story about a woman who is married to a producer, and she herself is, she's a screenwriter or something. She's something to do with Hollywood. And he decides that he doesn't want to be with her anymore. And so she just has to kind of figure out how to divorce her husband and also get custody of her child. I can't give this one a rating because I ended up not finishing it. I gave up at 50%. I have never in my life not enjoyed characters as much as I did not enjoy these characters. Like, they were awful. I just hated them. Most of the situations the girl was getting into just totally did not make sense. It was like she had her own career, and it was an established career she met before her husband, but she was somehow acting like she was like stuck with him. I don't know what was going on. It was just a bizarre book. I don't know what was happening there. So that was that. The next book was The Bromance Book Club by Lyssa K. Adams. So this is a story about a guy who is a professional baseball player, and he is married to the love of his life, but she asks him for a divorce, and he doesn't know what to do, and he wants to figure out a way to win her back. So one of his friends sees that he's struggling and approaches him about a secret club that his friend is in that is called the Bromance Book Club. Basically, what the Bromance Book Club does is they use romance novels as manuals to try and repair relationships. So that's what they decide to do to help this dude out to win his woman back. So this one I gave a 4.5 out of 5. This book was just refreshing. I felt like it was a peek behind the happily ever after curtain, because you know how like you read a book, two people fall in love, and then that's the end. But in this one, it's like the falling in love already happened, and you get to like see what happens after the fact. The cast of characters was amazing. They were hilarious. They were awesome. They were just so genuine. And I felt like the work that gets done on the marriage was very genuine and very real. I liked how there was like a second book that is being read in the romance book club, and you get to kind of like also enjoy that book. I thought it was a joy to read. And if you've been married for a while, I think this would be a great read because it's kind of a good, realistic reminder of just checking in on your partner and stuff like that. So I thought that was really cute. Okay, the next one that I read was called Heartless by Elsie Silver. And this is the second in the series from that earlier book that I read about the bull rider. I liked the character that's in the first one that ends up getting like a spin-off book, and I'm really glad I read it. So basically what happens is the best friend of the girl from the first book agrees to be the nanny for a grumpy single dad that lives out on a ranch. And he's older by like 13 years, and they both have chemistry, but they're both staying away from each other for obvious reasons. This book I gave a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed this book, which is weird because honestly, it's just kind of like a basic love story. But I just found myself smiling the entire time. There was a lot of tropes that are touched in this one. So we have the meet cute employee / boss. There was an age gap, and then there was like the grouchy man and sunshiny girl type thing. Usually that's like way over the top and too much chaos for me, but I just felt like it was executed very well in this one. There was also a really great sense of family in this book that I thought was adorable. The scenery was really great. It's set out in Canada on a ranch, so that was cool. And there was like some laugh out loud moments in this book. So I just really enjoyed it, and I definitely liked it better than the first one in the series. The next one that I read was called Just Like Magic by Sarah Hogel. I don't even know how to explain this book, but basically there's a woman who is a influencer, and I think she also used to be maybe an actress or something. And basically her life is falling apart, but she wants everybody to believe that she's doing great. So she has to convince her family with expensive gifts and things like that, that she's not a failure. So she is kind of willowing away in pain and sorrow one evening because of how her life has turned out. And she decides to play a Christmas record, and the record player like malfunctions, and she somehow summons a magical man called Hall E. Day, who's there to make her Christmas wishes come true. So this book, I gave a 2 out of 5. I felt like the book was bizarre, like especially for a Christmas book, because it almost has kind of like a witchy, superstitious, supernatural, like Halloween vibe to it, that I feel like maybe it would have made more sense as like a Halloween situation. The characters were not likable at all. I had no connection, and I did not care what happened at the end. And that's when you know that a book is not that great. The reason why I gave it a 2 and not like a 1 is because there were some funny moments in it, and like the idea of the story seemed pretty good, but I just feel like the execution was not great. Okay, so the next book that I read was Crazy Stupid Bromance, and this was book number 3 in the Bromance book club series by Lyssa K. Adams. So I just talked about book number 1. I had read book number 2 like 2 or 3 months ago, and so then I went to book number 3. So this is the story about a man who is a reformed hacker who owns his own company doing like, computer security and things like that. And his best friend, who is the owner of a cat cafe, and basically she finds out some troubling family secrets, and he is there for her as her best friend, but their feelings start to develop in a little bit more. I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5. I read this book in one sitting, which is not very easy to do because I have a 9-month-old and other things to do in my life, but somehow over a weekend I was able to read this entire book in one sitting. It was a very special book. I wouldn't say that Friends to Lovers is normally something that's like my favorite, but something about the way this was written was just very special. There was a lot of layers to this, and there was a lot going on. So I ended up experiencing like all of the emotions you can experience in a book. And I don't know, it was just wonderful. It was very cheesy. There's very cheesy moments in it, but it was just so cute. Okay, the next book that I read was called Fall into Temptation by Lucy Score. This one was really cute. So this is basically the story about Beckett Pierce, which is funny because I read another book this month with the title Beckett Pierce, but this is a different person, different author. So Beckett Pierce is the most eligible bachelor in a small town up in upstate New York. He also happens to be the mayor of said small town. But this woman shows up. She's a single mom, and she is going through life changes, and she decides the best thing for her is to move to a small town, try to build up a community, and she opens up her own yoga studio. And she has sworn off men because of everything that happened with her ex, and she just wants to focus on her and her kids and growing her business. But unfortunately, she keeps running into Beckett, who is the mayor of the town and also her landlord. So this one I gave a 4 out of 5. This one, if you like the show Gilmore Girls, you'd probably love this because there's Gilmore Girl vibes to it. There's even a situation where there's like a town meeting that was really hilarious, and it reminded me of Gilmore Girls. It was a really cute love story, but it's called Fall into Temptation, and the book, the cover is like very fall vibes. The one that you're about to see on the screen is not fall vibes, but I think she switched the cover, and so when I bought it, it was like fall vibes. I didn't really get fall vibes from it, but it does take like a little bit of a while to warm up, but there's like a good balanced frustration, and I felt like the two main characters were very, very genuine. It is a miscommunication type situation, so if you don't like miscommunication, you might not like this one. And the two main characters are incredibly stubborn. But I just felt like the family that surrounded them was adorable. The setting of the town was really adorable, and it was just like a fun read. So if you're looking for something to read that'll be fun, that would be the one for you. Okay, so the next book that I read was called The X Hex by Erin Sterling. This is the story about a girl who was dating this guy, and they had fallen head over heels in love with each other, but he broke her heart by revealing that he was already betrothed to someone else. So she and her best friend get together, and they're like drinking, and they decide to hex her ex. And they're like joking around though with like a Bath and Body Works candle. Well, 9 years goes by, and all of a sudden he comes back to the town because there's like a centennial celebration happening, and his family basically founded the town. And he discovers that the hex took its, you know, it worked, and it wasn't supposed to work. So this one I give a 4.5 out of 5. If you want, you know, I know Halloween is done now by the time you see this video, but this is like the perfect like fall / Halloween book. This was like technically a romance, but I feel like the romance totally took a backseat to it because the story itself was just so cute. And honestly, there were sections where I felt like the romance was getting in the way because I just wanted the mystery that was happening with the whole curse and hex thing. I wanted to find out a solution for it. So it was like the romance was getting in the way. The characters were super quirky, and there were some scenes that were just laugh out loud funny. I felt like it had spooky vibes, but it wasn't like over the top spooky, and it just had like a light, like humorous, just balance to it. So I just loved it, and I didn't want to put it down because I just wanted to solve the issue. It was really good. So if you're looking for like kind of like spooky fall type vibe book, that would be the one. The next book that I read was called Bread and Roses 2 by Catherine Patterson. And this one is the story about a young girl who, her father had passed away. Her mother and her older sister are union workers, and they are participating in a strike in Lawrence, Massachusetts that really was happening during that time. So it's like a historical fiction. This is actually like a young adult historical fiction, which I didn't realize. So unfortunately, I give this one a 3 out of 5. I grew up in Massachusetts, and I had no idea about the strike situation. So I'm happy that like my eyes were open to what was going on. But I think this book was just meant for a younger audience. And so although it's labeled that way, that's all I can really, I mean, to me, honestly, it would be more like a 2 out of 5, but I'm giving it an extra star because it is a young adult. But I think even for a young adult, it was just written very simply, and it was just, there wasn't much to it. I do like how everything gets tied up in the end, and I think there is a good message to the story. And I felt like the story was told in a really impartial way. So I feel like if it was read by school students, it would be good because they can kind of make their own conclusions. So that was good. The next book that I read was called Banking the Billionaire by Max Monroe. This is a story about a girl who is a famous photographer, and she is a notorious one-night stander. She does not like commitment, and she ends up hooking up with a friend of a friend who they've always kind of had like a little bit of a frenemy banter to them. They end up hooking up, and she's like a one-night stander, he's a one-night stander, but she decides that she wants to prank him because he's constantly pranking other people. So she pranks him into thinking that she's like a stage 5 clinger and that she's moved into his house. But he discovers that and decides to try and out-prank her. So then basically the two of them are just trying to prank each other. This one I gave a 4 out of 5. It was a little basic, but it was really hilarious. Like the banter that happens and the shenanigans that the two of them take against each other was hilarious. This is a very like mature romance, and I don't mean in the sense of like there's spicy moments, because there are spicy moments, but I mean more like there wasn't that annoying like possessiveness. It was more about two people who care about each other and allow each other to do things in life without, you know, without restriction. So I loved that. It was just adorable. I just thought it was adorable. So 4 out of 5 on that one. The next book that I read was called The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams. And this is the story about a former ballerina who had been injured. So she now teaches ballet to low-income kids, basically. And then she is best friends with an NFL quarterback. She is secretly in love with him, and one night while she's in, she gets really drunk, and she doesn't realize that she spills all of her feelings about the quarterback to a reporter who is recording her. So the video gets released, and then the quarterback's publicist decides that they need to fake date each other. So this book I gave a 4.25 out of 5. It was just freaking adorable. Like, I loved the characters, I loved the friendship, I loved like the buildup of the relationship. I loved that there was a dual POV, so you kind of knew what both the female and the male were experiencing. I mostly loved the dual POV because the male ends up interacting with like his NFL teammates, and like the solutions they're trying to come up with for the situation is freaking hilarious. The entire book is about miscommunication, so if you don't like miscommunication, this would not be for you. But the way that it comes up and finishes in the end, I just felt like it was like the epitome of a romance. There's not any spice in this one, like barely any. So if you want like a PG-13 type situation, this would be the one. There's like flirting that happens and stuff, but no like outwardly spicy scenes. The next book that I read was called The It Girl by Ruth Ware. This is a thriller, and this is the story about a girl who, I want to say 10 years ago, 10 years ago, had attended Oxford, and her best friend slash roommate was murdered. And present day, the man that was convicted of the murder dies in prison. And a reporter contacts her because he has some concerns about the conviction and feels like the wrong person went away for the crime. And he's decided to dedicate his time to making sure that the correct killer gets put away. This one I gave a 4 out of 5. I would honestly even give it like a 4.25 or maybe even a 4.5. It was such a good thriller for the fall because it's got like that dark academia type situation happening. It's set in Oxford, and there's like kind of like a creepy situation happening, and I got sucked in like immediately. But I also loved how I got sucked in right away, but the writing like steadily picks up the pace. So it's like you're not like, your heart isn't racing the entire time. It really builds up to that moment. The story is very basic, so that's why I don't give it like a full 5 out of 5 because I've read this exact plot before. But the one thing that I love about this is I was able to connect with the characters a little bit more in this one than I normally do in thrillers, but I was never like completely invested. So that's the only thing, like I wasn't like completely invested with them, but I also like, it wasn't like I couldn't stand them like I've done in the past with other thrillers. Okay, the next book that I read was called The Buyin, and this is the Graham Brothers book series number 1, and this is by Emma St. Clair. And this is the story about a guy. I want to say he was previously a football player, and his dad is also a retired football player or something like that. And his dad decides to basically Schitt's Creek a town out in Texas, and the son wants to talk his dad out of doing it, but then he finds out that the town that his dad bought is actually the town that the woman who he was in love with and like the one that got away lives in the town. So he decides to go along with his dad's plan because he wants to see if he can recuperate the relationship with this girl. So this one I gave a 3 out of 5. It was really adorable, but it was just kind of forgettable, and the romance, it was just a little hard for me to get into because there's basically like a 5-year time jump, and it just felt like it was a little weird how he wasn't with this girl for 5 years. And it's like in 5 years, if this woman meant as much to you as she did, like why all of a sudden are you like so invested, but in the 5 years you didn't do that much? I don't know if that's coming off right, because like I don't want to give away anything, but I hope you get what I'm saying. I really loved the family, and I loved the small town, so I feel like I might like more in this series, but it just didn't knock me off my feet, basically. So that's that. Okay, the next one was called The Naked Fisherman by Jewel E. Ann. And this is the story about a girl who's been sheltered in a Christian family, and she's 18 years old now, and her mom was just released from prison after 5 years in prison. So she hasn't been in contact with her mom since she was 13. So her grandparents that raised her in the Christian values, you know, give her their blessing to go spend some time with her mom and try to reconnect. When she gets there, she finds out that her mom has to leave and go to LA. And I want to say it's in Colorado, so it's based in Colorado. But the mom has to go to LA for training for work because she's a hairstylist. So the mom is like, I know you just turned 18, so I'm having my landlord who lives upstairs keep an eye on you. And he also offered you to work for his company in his office to keep your days busy until I get back. This one I gave a 2 out of 5. This one has so much frustrating back and forth, and there's barely any plot to it. Also, I personally just cannot stand the books where there's a sexually unexperienced person in a book that's kind of being pushed by another character, and then it's supposed to be okay because that other character is really attractive. That just rubs me the wrong way. There's a 10-year age gap in this book, which normally I don't mind age gaps, but when it's an 18-year-old, that's a little pushing it for me, especially because it felt like the maturity wise, there was like a 20-year age gap, because she was 18, but she was also like super sheltered. So she felt more like younger, you know? So I don't know. Also, there's no closure in the situation. This ends on a cliffhanger. So like you get all the way to the end, I dedicated all this time, and then boom, you know? The next book was called The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. And this book was the story of a man who's a caseworker. He goes around to orphanages and basically does an evaluation of them and sends a recommendation on whether they should stay open or if they should be closed based on the treatment and development of the children that live there. He has been working for this company for 17 years, and he's a very black and white person. So he doesn't allow his emotions to take over, and he just reports the facts in a very unbiased manner. So the upper management of the company that he works for decides that he's the perfect person to go out to a very special orphanage that has 6 magical and potentially dangerous children living at it, so he can do an evaluation in over a 30-day period, sending weekly reports about whether or not this orphanage should be allowed to stay open. This book, I gave out 5 out of 5. This book was so special. If you're like into the Harry Potter or like specifically like the Fantastic Beasts type vibe, you would love this. I just loved this book. I was enchanted by the book, and I just felt like the message that is overall in this book was ringing so loud, but it didn't feel like really preachy. And I felt like the writing was so detailed and so exquisite, but it was never over the top. It was just done in such a great way. And there was a lot of really dry, funny humor that's like sprinkled in that just breaks it up. And it was like warm and cozy. It's just the perfect fall vibe book. This is nothing that I would read. It's like kind of like a fantasy book. I think it was called Magical Realism or something like that. But I loved it. Okay, the next book that I read was The Wrong Bride by Katharina Maura. Probably completely wrong. So this is the story about a famous model who is in love with her best friend's brother. But the problem is that he is engaged and has been with her sister for the past 5 years. Unfortunately, her sister selfishly decides a week before the wedding that she wants to call it off. But they are required to get married because their families are trying to merge for their media companies. So because the sister has walked away, both of the families have determined that she needs to marry the brother's best friend that she's been secretly in love with. This one I gave a 4 out of 5. This one was such a roller coaster of emotions, and I could not put this book down. Like, I stayed up until like 1 o'clock in the morning reading, which I should not be doing. But I was sucked in. There was a lot of confliction going on between I don't know how to explain it. There's like a lot of confliction happening. My thing is this, I love dual POVs in books normally, but I felt like it actually worked against this story because they give the male's POV in the beginning, and it's like his feelings from the beginning conflict with his feelings at the end. And so that was what threw me off, and that's why it's not a 5 out of 5. There are 2 villains in this story that I felt like add like such a sense of wickedness and like just like spicy entertainment, and so I loved that. There's like some antics that they do that my heart was breaking for the main character because I really like the main female character. But yeah, overall just a really good read. Okay, the next book was called Spaceballs. That's correct, you heard me right, by Sarah Hudson. So this is the story about a billionaire who meets up with an astronaut, and they agree to have a one-night stand. Both of them are the type that they don't do commitment and they decide they're just going to have a one-night stand, but life keeps bringing them back together, and so they decide to take on a friends with benefits situation. But then life happens and their friends with benefits might need to get a little bit more serious. This one I gave a 2.5 out of 5. I really liked the idea of this book, and I've seen people post how good it was, so I was like excited to read it. But I just felt like the plot really dragged on. There wasn't a lot happening, and it wasn't enough for me. Also, this is the 4th book in the series, and I haven't read any of the other books, and I feel like the author took way too much time wrapping up other stuff from the other books, and it just felt like if you're trying to read this standalone, it just took up way too much real estate. So just wasn't for me. Okay, so the last book that I read in the month of October was Not a Nation of Immigrants by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. So this one is a nonfiction, basically a history book regarding settler colonialism. It's hard because all the other books I'm talking about are fiction. I can't really give you a summary. So that's what the subject is. We'll just go there. This book I would have to give a 4 out of 5. The thing is, my jaw dropped during this book more than it's ever dropped in any other book that I read. There was so much stuff that I was just completely unaware of and ignorant to. But I felt like the way that it's written is a very matter of fact. So you're not going to feel like you're being preached to. At least I didn't feel that way. So if you're interested in like an unbiased, or what I felt like was an unbiased retelling of history, with details that were previously, I guess, like censored, this would be a good book for you. The thing I don't like about this book is that and this is a me thing, I don't know if it's really the book thing, but I am the type, like, I enjoy like a chronological order of things, but instead this was more like topic oriented. So it would like discuss a topic and it would go from like the 1400s to present day, and it was just kind of jumping all over the place for me. So it's kind of hard for me to follow. And again, that might be a me thing. But I just felt like it was an eye-opening book experience for me. I just feel like the information in there is really important to know. I've also felt like now being a mom, you know, I don't know what we're going to do about schooling wise, but if they do go to school, I'm going to have to know that I need to fill them in on some information, because you would not believe how far back in history curriculum has been amended to, I don't know, to a certain degree. Hopefully that all made sense. But anyways, if you need an eye-opening book and you want to, you know, expand your horizon on topics, I'd recommend reading that book. So that's everything we read in the month of October. So let's talk about this huge stack of books, boom, that we need to read in the month of November. I don't know if I'll get to all of them. Some of these are repeats from last month because I didn't get to them this month, but let's just quickly go through them. When in Rome by Sarah Adams. So this is the one that wrote the cheat sheet that I loved. I have a feeling I'll love this one. Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan. I have heard great things about this, so I really want to read that one. Good Girl Complex by Elle Kennedy. I need to put this like at the top of my list because I've been wanting to read that a while. Evie Drake Starts Over by Linda Holmes. Dating You / Hating You by Christina Lauren. One of my favorite authors, by the way. Lacey Walden, The Layover. Bringing Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore. My best friend blessed me for my birthday with a couple books. One of them was Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby, which was on my want to read list, so thank you for that. And then also Daughters of the Occupation by Shelley Sanders. Amazing. I'm excited about both of those. Thank you to Kristen for that. The Wedding Ringer by Carrie Rea. Also, my bestie sent me this one because she's read it and said it was like unforgettable, so I need to read it. She said bump it all the way to the top. So this is Ellen Marie Wiseman's The Lost Girls of Willowbrook. It's a thriller. Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. I need to put this at the top because I already started this back in August and I need to get it done. This one, these next two are from Book of the Month. Hester by Lori Lico Albanese, and All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. In case you don't know how Book of the Month works, basically it's a subscription service and they offer 5 to 7, I want to say, books that you can pick, and they will mail it to you. The first month is only $5, so I'll put my referral link down below. I get a credit if you do it, but they don't like sponsor me, you know. But if you do sign up for it, I get some type of a referral, but you get your first book for $5, and this is like a nice thick hardcover book, so it's worth, even if you cancel after the first month. After that, I want to say it's $15.99 a month for the hardcover. And then what I love about it is that you can also add on books. So like last month I bought this one and I added this one on, and this one was only $10.99. Like, this would probably be like a $30 book on Amazon. This is a heavy duty book, and it was only $10.99 to add on. So I love that feature, and it's free shipping, so that works out really well. So that's book of the month. I'll link that down below. And also I wanted to go over the other books that I have either on my Kindle or whatever. Okay, so the other books that I wanted to read was My Money, My Way by Kumiko Love. If you guys don't follow The Budget Mom and you're interested in finances and things like that, she's phenomenal, so I would do that. I also wanted to reread Verity. I don't know if I'll get to it though. Then I have The Housemaid, Scandalized by Ivy Owens. Okay, and so then the other book that I have is The Santa Suit by Mary Kay Andrews. One of the YouTubers I follow, Jessica O'Donoghue, posted that was really good, so I put that on my library queue. And then I have Emma Straub, This Time Tomorrow, Stephen King, Billy Summers. I've never read that one, so I wanted to read it. Deja Dead by Kathy Reichs, which is, if you guys watch the show Bones, that's what Bones is based on. And The Push by Ashley Audrain. And then last but not least is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston, I think. So that's everything that I want to read in the month of November. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to check me out on Instagram, because I do put little mini book reviews pretty much like within days after reading it. So if you're interested in that, you can follow me on Instagram at Kate508. My Goodreads and my book of the month link will be linked down below, as well as my Instagram, and I think that's pretty much it. If you like this video, be sure to check out, I always link the playlist at the end of all of the other books videos that I have, so be sure to check that out. Let me know if you have any book recommendations of stuff you want me to read, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for stopping by. Have a wonderful day. Bye.